Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House suspend the rules and pass the bill S1351.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Senate 1351, an act to study and prevent child abuse in youth residential programs and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Kentucky, Mr. Guthrie, and the gentlewoman from Washington, Ms. Schreier, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Kentucky.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of S1351, the Stop Institutional Child Abuse Act. In 2022, there were approximately 34,000 children and adolescents placed in these youth residential treatment programs. These programs play a pivotal role in helping young people navigate mental health and behavioral health challenges. Unfortunately, there have been many instances of youth being mistreated in certain residential treatment programs. This is unacceptable. S1351 will require the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine to conduct a study examining the state of youth residential programs. It also requires recommendations on how to improve oversight, disseminate education and training resources, and enhance interagency coordination, among others. Every residential treatment program should be a secure place for children to heal, and parents and guardians deserve transparency. I encourage my colleagues to support this bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentlewoman from Washington is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of S1351, the Stop Institutional Child Abuse Act. This legislation, sponsored by Representatives Khanna and Carter in the House, would direct the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine to conduct a study on youth residential treatment programs. These programs offer a variety of services to adolescents and young adults with emotional, mental health, or substance use disorder needs. Residential treatment can play a pivotal role in helping young people navigate serious behavioral and emotional challenges. But too often, these programs only harm these children, subjecting them to abuse and neglect. Young people deserve to be safe and properly cared for and to receive treatment in the least restrictive environment that meets their needs. Youth residential treatment programs need proper oversight to ensure that young people are protected against abuse and neglect. This legislation would provide greater transparency around the prevalence of abuse in youth residential treatment programs, as well as recommendations to improve the implementation of best practices regarding the health and the safety of young people in these systems. In carrying out the study, this legislation would require the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine to consult with a wide range of stakeholders. This would include health professionals, individuals who have lived in youth residential programs, parents, child abuse experts, program administrators, and state and federal agencies, among others. I hope my colleagues will join me in this effort to strengthen accountability and transparency in youth residential treatment programs. I encourage all of my colleagues to vote yes on S1351, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman reserves. The gentleman from Kentucky is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield 5 minutes to my good friend, the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Carter.
The gentleman from Georgia is recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in strong support of the Stop Institutional Child Abuse Act, which I am proud to lead with Senator Merkley and Representative Khanna. Before I begin, I want to start by thanking Paris Hilton for her hard work, her bravery, and her vulnerability in sharing her story about abuse at the hands of a youth residential treatment facility. This truly was a courageous act on her part. Paris, you're already making a difference, and I applaud you for using your voice to advance such a critical cause. When Paris first met with me last Congress and shared her story about being in institutional care as a child, I'll be quite honest, I was horrified. I believe the words out of my mouth were, "This sounds like it's being run by the cartel." Let me tell you, everything that I've heard since that meeting from policy experts, advocates, and survivors has confirmed this terrifying truth. One child, just one child experiencing abuse is too many. Thousands of children are being funneled into seemingly safe institutional care facilities, only to be dehumanized and abused in a crisis, one that I am so glad there is bipartisan and bicameral support to address. There are as many as 200,000 minors in youth residential programs or facilities across the country. At their best, youth residential programs provide counseling, treatment, and care for struggling teens and children. But at their worst, they subject innocent children to physical, emotional, and sexual abuse, which has led to hospitalizations, prolonged trauma, and even death. Disgustingly, far too many of these centers are operating at their worst. The Stop Institutional Child Abuse Act, which I'm proud to be the Republican lead of in the House of Representatives, would increase transparency and accountability for these programs so that parents and children alike have an accurate understanding of the practices, the goals, and the ethics of these centers. It will also help to establish best practices for health, safety, care, and treatment, so that there's a federal standard for how institutionalized youth are treated. This will also give parents the information they need to make an informed decision about whether institutional care is the best option for their child. Now, Mr. Speaker, I'm not trying to intervene on state rights here. Yes, they are regulated by the states, and I want to be clear about that to my colleagues. The states will continue to regulate them. This simply calls for more transparency, for responsibility, accountability. It gives parents the opportunity to see if these centers truly are using seclusion or physical restraints. It does not intend to interfere with the states regulating these facilities. As you know, I'm a healthcare professional, and we abide by the Hippocratic rule: do no harm. It's time institutional care facilities were held to that same standard. Look, there are a lot of good facilities out there. There's no question about that. But there are some bad ones, and that's what we're trying to identify here. Every profession has bad actors. I'm a pharmacist, the second most well-respected profession in America. We have bad actors, just like every profession does. That's what we're trying to identify here. It's time that institutional care facilities were held to the same standards of the Hippocratic Oath: do no harm. This bill has already passed the Senate, and I would like to thank Speaker Johnson, Leader Scalise, and many others for bringing this bill before the House here today. We have the votes. We have the votes, and it's time to get this done. Who would vote against this? We all want our children safe. This is simply calling for more accountability, more transparency. This is simply calling for best practices. This is our attempt to identify bad actors. The children in these facilities can't wait another Congress for change. Sunlight is the best disinfectant there is, and we're going to light the institutional care industry up with transparency and oversight because our children deserve it. I commend Senator Merkley and Representative Khanna for working on this issue, and I urge my colleagues to support this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields. The gentleman from Kentucky.
I reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The gentlewoman from Washington is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to yield 5 minutes to Mr. Khanna, my colleague from California, to whom I'm so grateful for sponsoring with Mr. Carter this legislation.
The gentleman from California is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Representative Schreier, for your leadership. Thank you to Representative Carter for working across the aisle and to the leadership for bringing this bill on the floor for a vote. I want to join Representative Carter in thanking Paris Hilton and her husband Carter, both up in the gallery as we speak. They really helped drive this and start this. I had coffee with Carter 4 years ago, and we were talking about technology in my district. And at the end of it, he says, by the way, I'm married to Paris Hilton. Like you just dropped that at the end of a conversation. I said, Paris Hilton, okay, that's interesting. And then he said, there's this issue I want to talk about. And I said, here we go. Here's some celebrity issue, and person will fly in, do PR, leave. I said, Carter, what is it? And he talked about the institutional facilities, these congregate care facilities, and the thousands of American kids who go there hoping to get assistance, hoping to get support, and instead face sexual abuse, face horrific discipline, face conditions where they aren't given enough food. And he said, Paris went through that. And so I was immediately struck by his vulnerability in sharing that. And then I met Paris, and I met her mother, and I saw the emotion that she had. And I met so many survivors who told their stories. And Representative Carter knows this. Paris and Carter, her husband, and the survivors came to our offices again and again for years because they wanted to do something with these experiences to make it better for America's children. We are often so polarized in this chamber. We disagree sometimes on, it seems like, everything. But as we approach Christmas and we approach these holidays, I think we can feel good that when it comes to America's children, we put them first. We did something right. We did something to help the American people. And we did that because of the commitment and leadership that Paris and so many survivors have shown. I feel good today about being a member of Congress, working with you, Representative Carter, proud of being part of this institution, and I appreciate the leadership for allowing this bill to come. I hope it'll pass unanimously.
The gentleman yields. The gentlewoman from...
I reserve.
I have no further speakers, so I'm prepared to close. But
The chair must also remind members that the rules do not allow references to persons in the gallery. The gentleman from Washington is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would just love to reiterate, particularly as a pediatrician, my support of S. 1351, the Stop Institutional Child Abuse Act. This is so important, as we've already heard through these stories, and we want to make sure that when our adolescents and young adults are sent off for the best care, that they receive the best care and not abuse. I encourage my colleagues to vote for this bill, and I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields. The gentleman from Kentucky is recognized.
I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to close with saying that there has been quite a bit of hard work put into this bill, quite a bit of persistence, and without referring anybody in the gallery, I know there are people who have worked really, really hard to get to where we are now. I support this bill. I encourage all my colleagues to vote yes, and I will yield back.
The gentleman yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass Senate 1351? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative.
Nays?
The yeas and nays are requested. All those in favor of taking this vote by the yeas and nays will rise and remain standing until counted. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20. Further proceedings on this question will be postponed.